James had just told Diep, I'm choosing us every day. When his phone buzzed and his face went still,
I'm choosing us every day.
one message,
Then choose us.
Hanoi
too.
lead
I am.
verified.
You're not.
Next step
You're
is
not.
verification contact. Your decision. Diep's eyes narrowed. She could hear the weight in his silence.
Hi.
Then, from outside the gate, a familiar voice called into the dark. James, we need to talk.
Tú Diep.
Mr. Juan.
Bà.
Same moment,
Về nhà.
inside.
Lo-
Nay slept beneath the word
James,
she'd
is that
drawn
you?
all morning.
Stay back.
Safe.
Let me in.
Like and subscribe if you believe protecting someone's heart matters as much as protecting a home. James didn't start that morning at the office. He started on a site, boots on dirt, phone in his hand, taking technical photos with careful angles. Workers hovered close, watching. Because James was the kind of boss who didn't assume anything. One worker asked, half nervous, half proud, "Did you take the pictures for the authorities yet?" James crouched, lined the tape measure up with the concrete, and snapped a photo with the numbers in full view. "I'm taking them now. Height check, thickness check, no guessing." The worker pointed at the measurement. 50 centimeters. Within the range they require. James zoomed in, took a second photo from another angle, and nodded. Good. If we do it clean, nobody can twist it later. A younger guy laughed under his breath. "Anna works like a lawyer," James answered without looking up. "Because sometimes it ends up in court." He was sliding the phone into his pocket when the air changed. Shade shifted. Footsteps slowed, and he felt that familiar, quiet presence. The quiet man with the folder stepped beside his car. No greeting, no small talk. Just a slim file placed on the hood. "I have an update," the man said, voice flat and careful. James's throat tightened. "Talk." The folder opened. 2 old photos slid out, faded edges, soft from time. The first one hit James right in the ribs. Diep as a child, not smiling, not posing, just standing there like she'd already learned that life was something you survived, not something you waited to enjoy. James stared too long. It hurt to see her small like that. "These aren't her mother," the man said. "But they confirm timeline." James forced a steady breath. "And the mother?" "Alive," the man replied. "The investigation points to Hanoi." James felt his stomach drop. Quiet, heavy. "Name?" "Dieu," the man said. "That name appears in multiple references." James swallowed. "Mr. Juan?" The man flipped a page. "Mr. Juan and Dieu were once involved. Poor families. Parents separated them. Later, she remarried." James's spine went cold. Mr. Juan didn't show up casually. He showed up because he sensed movement. "Address?" James asked. "Not yet," the man said. "We're narrowing it. If we can verify, we report. If we can't, we stop, unless you instruct otherwise." James closed the folder gently, like closing a door that could slam open on its own. "Discreet," he said. "No contact, no approach. I won't drop this on her without certainty." The man nodded once. Understood. James drove home with the same calm he used in boardrooms, except now it was aimed at one woman's heart. When he walked into the kitchen, the stove crackled, jars lined the counter, and the room smelled like sugar turning into comfort. Nai sat at the table drawing "safe" in big letters like she was running a company. The dog lay near the warmest corner, eyes half closed, ears still listening. "You're home early," Diep said, surprised. "Half day on site," James replied easily. "Then I'm yours." Diep looked at him for one beat too long. "You look busy." "I am," James said softly, "but I'm here." He shifted the day on purpose. "You still want to plant the new field by the stream?" Diep's shoulders loosened. "Yes, we promised Nai." Nai popped up like she'd been called into a meeting. Field day. They walked out together, Diep with seedlings tucked against her side, James with a small shovel, Nai with her stuffed orange tucked under her arm. The dog trotted beside them like security. At the stream field, the soil was sandy and loose, the kind that feels ready. Diep knelt and let it run through her fingers. "Cucumbers will like this," she said. "Herbs, too. Potatoes if we loosen it right." Nai pointed like a tiny architect. "Cucumbers there, potatoes there, flowers there." Diep laughed. "Flowers are not edible." Ni shrugged. "Mom is edible happiness." James laughed out loud. Real, surprised laughter. A neighbor offered to plow a small section with a buffalo. James agreed fast, then froze a little when the buffalo stepped forward like an employee who didn't care about job titles. Diep hid her smile. "CEO," she teased. "Don't fight the buffalo. Follow." Nai clapped. "Go, Dad!" The dog barked once and trotted alongside the buffalo like it belonged on payroll. After they'd planted a short row, Diep laid out lunch on the edge of the field. Rice, dried fish, bamboo shoots, simple food, but it tasted like earned peace. James exhaled. "I've never eaten like this in a field," he admitted. "You've lived too clean," Diep said. "Not cruel, just true." "I'm learning," James smiled. Then Diep's eyes narrowed gently, like she heard something underneath his words. "Your voice sounds strange," she said. "Wow, what's going on?" James set his chopsticks down. He didn't deny her instincts. "I'm handling something," he said. "Not because I don't trust you, because I don't want it to hit you wrong." Diep kept her voice quiet. "You can't hide things from me forever. Promise me that." I promise," James said. "I'm just confirming reality before we name it." Diep nodded, but added one line like a boundary made of silk and steel. "Just don't let anyone else tell me first." James's jaw tightened. "They won't." Later, back at the company, he switched into CEO mode. Budgets, TET plans, stability. 74 workers, the report said. Most stayed. James calculated bonuses out loud. Base around 6 million. 2-year staff get more. 3-year staff get more. Clear categories. No favorites. Someone mentioned gifts. Money is easier for workers far away. Then we keep gifts simple, James decided. Tea boxes with our logo, cups, useful, and push more into cash. Then he added, almost casually, I'm not taking my own TET bonus this year. Silence. Some families are carrying more hardship than I am, he said. Put it where it matters. That night, the house felt warm again. Nai fell asleep early, exhausted from field supervising. the dog curled near her bed like a quiet guard. Diep wiped the counter, moving slow, peaceful. "You were happy today," she said. "I was," James admitted. "That's why it scares me when you look like you're carrying something," Diep whispered. James stepped close and rested his hands lightly on her shoulders. "I'm still here," he said. "I'm choosing us. Every day." His phone buzzed. One message from the investigator. "Hanoi lead narrowed. Possible neighborhood identified. Next step is verification contact. Your decision." James stared. Diep's voice came soft behind him. "Who is texting you that late?" James turned with a smile that didn't quite land. And outside, beyond the gate, a motorbike slowed. A familiar voice called into the dark, polite as a handshake. "James!" "Mr. Juan said. Are you home? We need to talk." Mr. Juan's voice came from the gate, polite and steady. "James, are you home? We need to talk." Diep froze with the dish towel in her hand. James glanced at her, then at his phone, Hanoi on the screen, and stepped outside before fear could grow in the kitchen. Under the yard light, Mr. Juan stood beside his motorbike like this was a harmless visit. His smile was smooth, but his eyes were measuring. "I heard you've been asking old questions," Mr. Juan said. "Family questions." James kept his tone flat. "You heard wrong. Hanoi is noisy." Mr. Juan continued. "Records move. If the past comes back, it can embarrass her." James stepped closer. Boundary clear. "Don't use her name. I'm trying to protect her," Mr. Juan said quickly. "Protection doesn't arrive at midnight," James replied. Mr. Juan's smile thinned. "There are documents, James. Things that can be interpreted. If you have facts, give them to the proper channel," James said. Mr. Juan lowered his voice. "I can tell you where she came from." James felt the pull of answers and the trap inside the offer. "Not like this. Go home." Mr. Juan's face tightened for a heartbeat. Then the smile returned. "Fine. When you're ready, you know where to find me." He rode away. James went back inside and found Diep still by the counter, eyes locked on his face. "What was that?" she asked. "Mr. Juan," James said. "He's circling." Diep's jaw set. "Circling what?" James looked at Nye's drawing on the table, safe in thick letters, and remembered her warning from the field. "Don't let anyone else tell me first. I need to tell you something," he said. Diep sat down without drama, straight-backed. "Tell me." James sat across from her. "Today someone brought me information about your past," he said. "About your mother." Diep's eyes went distant. "You found her?" "Not fully," James said. "But there's a lead in Hanoi. A name. Dieu. The investigator believes she's alive." Diep whispered the name like it was unfamiliar and heavy. "Dieu. I didn't tell you right away because I was trying to confirm," James said. "I was scared of hurting you with something uncertain." Diep's voice stayed soft, but it landed hard. "You don't get to carry my truth alone." "I know," James said. "I'm sorry." "Show me," Diep asked. James slid the old photo across the table. Diep stared at the child image, small body, serious eyes. and her breath caught. That's me, she said. James nodded. And Mr. Juan. The investigator believes he and Dieu were once involved. Families separated them. Later, she remarried. Diep let out a short, bitter breath. So he's afraid. Or he wants control, James said. Diep sat back and spoke like she was writing rules on a wall. If we do this, we do it my way. James didn't hesitate. Name it. Diep counted on her fingers. Verify identity first. No Mr. Juan near our home or our child. And if it turns messy, we stop and protect this house. Agreed, James said. The next morning, James called the quiet man with the folder. Proceed with verification, he said. No direct contact until identity is confirmed. Understood, came the calm reply. Nai wandered into the kitchen and sensed the adult tension instantly. What's happening? Diep crouched and met her eyes. Grown-up things, she said gently. Nothing scary. We're still safe. Nai glanced at her drawing. Safe, she said, like a promise. Yes, Diep whispered. Safe. By afternoon, the message arrived. Hanoi lead verified. Household registration matches. Meeting can be arranged in a public place. Your decision. James handed the phone to Diep and waited. Diep stared, breathing shallow. So she's real. She's real, James said. And you decide what you want. Diep swallowed. One conversation, she said. Public place and no pressure. Truth only. 2 days later, they flew to Hanoi at dawn. Nai stayed with James's mother, who promised to keep her close. The quiet man with the folder met them near a small tea shop behind a market lane. She agreed to come, he said. She only knows someone from her past asked to speak. Diep's knees went weak, so James guided her to a chair. He stayed quiet, close. When the woman arrived, she didn't look like a monster. She looked like a tired life, working hands, cautious posture, eyes that carried regret. She stopped in the doorway and whispered, Diep? Diep stood. Her voice came out thin. Why did you leave me? The woman's eyes filled immediately. I was young, poor. I was told you would have food and school, she said. I believed it. Then I was ashamed to come back. Diep's hands shook. Did you ever look for me? I tried. The woman nodded fast. Not enough. I was scared. Diep wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. I didn't come for a new mother, she said. I came for truth so I can stop wandering in the dark. Ask me, the woman whispered. I'll answer. They kept it clean. Names, dates, who decided what, where Diep was sent. Painful facts, spoken out loud, finally pinned down. When it was over, Diep stood straighter. I'm not ready for closeness, she said, but I'm ready to know you exist. That's all I can offer right now. The woman nodded, crying quietly. Thank you. Back home, the first thing Diep did was sit beside Nai and watch her draw. Nai lifted the page proudly. Safe, she announced. Diep laughed through tears and kissed her forehead. Yes, she whispered. Safe. Chuk. That night, after Nai fell asleep again, Diep sat with James at the table and stared at the old photo one last time. "I'm sad," she admitted. "But the mystery was the sharpest part. Now it's just a truth I can put on a shelf." James nodded. "And we control the shelf," he said. He texted the investigator a simple instruction: no more steps without Diep's request. Then he sent one calm message to Mr. Juan. "Do not come to this house again. No threats, just a boundary." Diep leaned her head against the back of the chair and, for the first time in days, her lungs finally remembered how. Here's what gets me. Sometimes the kindest love isn't secrecy. It's careful truth, shared at the right pace, with the right person beside you.